The hallway smells like wilted roses and rotting flesh. You stand at the threshold of a narrow corridor lit by flickering gas lamps, each flame trembling like a dying breath. The wallpaper peels in long, wet curls, stained yellow with smoke and something else, something darker, that once ran red but now clings black to the walls. Velvet curtains hang like funeral shrouds, heavy with dust and secrets. You can hear it, the sound of breathing, low and wet. It's coming from the room at the end of the hall. You don't want to go inside. But you do. The floor creaks beneath your feet, not in protest, but in resignation. Countless others have walked this same path. Some paid. Some never left. Inside, the bed is still warm. The sheets are crimson at the center, and torn at the corners. There is no struggle left in her now, just limbs, folded and still, and eyes that stare at the ceiling as if trying to remember the sky. She's no older than 13. Her lip is split. Her fingers are blue. On the vanity sits a cracked porcelain doll missing its eyes. Next to it, a vial of laudanum still half full. The perfume bottle lies broken on the floor, its scent clinging like guilt to everything in the room. Lavender. Musk. Blood. You hear footsteps in the hallway behind you. Slow. Confident. Male. You don't turn around. You already know what kind of man walks freely in places like this. This is no accident. This is a system. A machine fed by poverty, cloaked in velvet, and run by those who sip wine in gold-rimmed cups while children die behind locked doors. Outside, the city calls itself civilized. Christian. Clean. But here, beneath the lace and linen, the rot has a name. And a cost. They called them, fallen women, as if they slipped. As if they chose the fall. You're already this deep into their world. The least you can do is subscribe so their stories aren't forgotten again. Outside, the world pretended not to know. The streets of London gleamed beneath a veil of smoke and soot, horse-drawn carriages echoing down cobbled roads polished by rain and filth. Ladies in corsets and lace paraded through Hyde Park under parasols, their gloved hands holding Bibles or bouquets, never bones. Men tipped their hats, quoted scripture, and warned their daughters about the dangers of disobedience. Queen Victoria herself was their shining emblem. Chaste, regal, draped in black after her husband's death, a monument to devotion and discipline. Under her gaze, modesty became law. The silhouette of a woman's ankle could collapse reputations. The whisper of impropriety could cost a girl her future. They called it the age of virtue. An era of civility. But just 3 streets from Westminster, another empire thrived, one without marble or manners. Here, women did not wear lace. They wore bruises. Perfume did not hide their scent. It tried. And failed, to mask decay. More than 5,000 girls worked the alleys of London by night, their names never printed, their stories never saved. They were called whores, sinners, temptresses. But behind every trembling girl in a gaslit room stood a man in a tailored waistcoat with the smell of sanctimony still clinging to his skin. A politician. A bishop. A father. A judge. By day, he spoke of virtue. By night, he drank gin from the mouth of a child. Morality campaigns raged in the press. There were speeches about God. Movements to rescue fallen women. But none of them asked who pushed those women over the edge. No law punished the men who made demands. No hand reached out for the girl who couldn't pay rent without selling her body. She was made the threat, he, the customer. Scandals came, but few saw print. One earl's tastes ran so young that even his servants whispered, but nothing reached the court. The diary of a duchess spoke of secret rooms and paid silence. Parliament quietly scrubbed names from ledgers before they leaked. The press, owned by the same hands that opened brothel doors, kept quiet. Every inked line a lie. Every silence, a crime. Society loved its monsters, but only when they wore powdered wigs. And the church? The same priests who denounced indecency on Sunday would find their way to the brothels of Soho by Monday night. In full collar. With coin in hand. This was not contradiction. It was calculation. A system that demanded purity while devouring innocence. A world built on pretending. They told the public that women like her were dirty. But filth doesn't choose its skin. It clings to whoever pays enough to wear it. You consume the secrets. But will you support the truth-tellers? Scroll past that button, and you're no better than the men who left coins on blood-stained sheets. She didn't come here by choice. She was born in an alley behind a butcher's shop. Her mother died before her second birthday, her name lost somewhere between parish records and sewage flow. By 9, she was sweeping the floor of a factory where the windows didn't open and the overseers didn't blink. At 10, her fingers bled from stitching shirts for men who would never learn her name. By 11, she was alone. The poorhouse had no room for orphans with lungs too weak to sew and bones too small to carry coal. She asked for bread one night, and a man offered her a ride. He wore a clean coat. Spoke gently. Promised a warm bed and a job cleaning silver. He left her in the hands of a woman who smiled with her mouth but not her eyes. The door closed behind her, and the lock turned. She was one of hundreds. Thousands. Girls pulled from the gutters, from the workhouses, from the long lines at soup kitchens. Not taken by force, but by desperation. The madams knew the signs. A sunken stomach. Bare feet in winter. Fingers clutched too tightly around a crust of bread. These girls didn't need to be chased. They just needed to be seen. And when they were seen, they vanished. Inside the brothel, the training began. Not with whips. But with words. This is your value. This is all the world will ever want from you. No one will marry you. But you'll be safe here, fed here, wanted here. Your body is currency. Learn to spend it well. They were given new names, so the old ones could die quietly. They were dressed in silk, not for comfort, but to make them look older. They were painted with rouge to hide the bruises. Their hair was curled, not with vanity, but to make them sell better. At first, they were sent to serve drinks. Clean rooms. Sit beside clients and laugh at jokes they didn't understand. But it never stopped there. The first touch came soon. The first stare. The first hand too low, too long. And then, one night, the madam knocked and said, "Tonight, it's your turn." She didn't know what sex was. She just knew it hurt. Charles Dickens once wrote of a girl named Nancy who was beaten to death in the shadows of a city that pretended not to see her. He gave her a name because so many others didn't have one. But Nancy wasn't fiction. She was every girl left behind by a system that fed on silence. In the records of a London court in 1864, a constable testified about a raid on a brothel where they found a girl of 9, naked, bruised, and mute. The judge dismissed the case for lack of credible witnesses. No one believed the child. They believed the men. There were no birthdays in the brothel. Only anniversaries of pain. The air was always warm, stale, thick with perfume and decay, a sweetness that coated your throat like syrup gone rancid. Beneath the velvet, beneath the painted faces and wine-stained lips, something festered. The rot didn't start in the walls. It started in the blood. Syphilis crept through the brothels like a fog, invisible and patient. It spared no one. Not the girl on her first night. Not the madam. Not the gentleman who paid in gold and refused protection. It began with sores, easily hidden with rouge. Then came the fevers. The rashes. The madness. And finally, the collapse, bones breaking from within, mouths filling with ulcers, minds unraveling into darkness. And the cure? Mercury. The doctors, if they could be called that, prescribed mercury injections, mercury ointments, mercury pills. The girls shivered through night sweats and vomiting, their gums bleeding, their teeth falling out. Sometimes the treatment killed them faster than the disease. But they kept coming. Because there was no alternative. Because rotting from the inside was better than being thrown out and starving in the street. Then there was the gin. They called it mother's ruin. But for brothel girls, it was mercy. They drank it until their limbs went numb. Until the screams outside the door sounded far away. Until they could smile when men entered, and not scream when the door shut behind them. It was cheap, it was constant, and it was lethal. Some girls drank themselves blind by 20. Others didn't make it that far. Laudanum was quieter. A drop on the tongue before the pain began. It came in tiny bottles and promised dreams instead of memories. A river of sleep to drift on when the flesh became too raw, the body too tired, the soul too thin to keep standing. And still the clients came. Still the girls performed. Even when they bled between customers. Even when their hair fell out in clumps. Even when they no longer remembered their real names. No one came for them when they collapsed. No family, because they'd been disowned. No doctors, because their lives were cheap. No priests, because salvation cost more than they had left. When they died, and many did, it was not with ceremony. It was with silence. Some were dumped in shallow graves behind the buildings. Others were wrapped in sheets and dropped into the Thames at night. The water took their names. The city washed its hands. One girl's name survived. Barely. Her name was Annie Wilkes. She was 14 when they found her. The coroner's report listed her cause of death as exhaustion and venereal decay. No family claimed her. The madam paid for a pine box and buried her outside consecrated ground. She had worked at the brothel for 2 years. That's longer than most. 2 years of 20 men a night. 2 years of being passed between hands like meat in the market. 2 years of dying in pieces. And when it was over, the city breathed a little easier. One less mouth. One less burden. One less body to hide. But Annie had a voice once. A laugh that echoed down stairwells. A scar behind her left ear from when she fell as a child. She had dreams once. Not big ones. Just clean sheets. A warm meal. A face that didn't recoil at hers. She got none of it. In the end, she was just another number. Another whisper that vanished beneath London's wet stones. They told themselves she was sinful. They told themselves she chose this. But disease doesn't choose. Addiction doesn't choose. And children don't choose to die in rooms that stink of perfume and piss. They just do. And the city moves on. She didn't own her body. But someone did. And often, it wasn't a man. Behind the brothel doors, behind the red glow of gaslight and the stale musk of gin and sweat, stood women. Not victims, but merchants. They were called madams. And they ran empires. In Victorian London, some of the wealthiest women didn't inherit land or marry into money. They sold flesh. Not their own, but that of other women, younger women, girls. They recruited. They trained. They disciplined. And they profited. Take Mary Jeffries, for example. She wasn't just a brothel owner, she was a trafficker with connections so deep the law couldn't touch her. Her operations stretched across Mayfair, Soho, and Bloomsbury. Her clientele included knights, clergy, magistrates. She offered specialty services, meaning virgins, meaning children. When she was finally exposed, the courts hesitated. The evidence was clear, but her client list was clearer. Names that couldn't be printed. Names that signed laws. Names that sat in Parliament. She was fined. Not imprisoned. Not punished. Just told to keep things quieter next time. The madams had rules. Not for decency, but for discretion. Silence was currency. Secrets were investments. Every brothel had a code: no real names, no eye contact with clients in daylight, no running into wives in the street. And they operated in luxury. Some brothels masqueraded as music halls. Others, as private salons. In Mayfair, there were drawing rooms with chandeliers and live pianists, rooms lined with imported silks where the daughters of laundresses pretended to be Parisian courtesans. The illusion was part of the price. A gentleman could arrive at a club on St. James's Street, have brandy with a bishop, and then disappear through a velvet-lined corridor that connected directly to a brothel. Secret tunnels built beneath the cobblestones. No carriages. No witnesses. These weren't the dirty alleys of Whitechapel. These were places of art. Architecture. Music. And underneath it all, trauma, finely perfumed and carefully packaged. The clients signed in under aliases. Mr. X. Dr. H. His Grace. But the ledgers still knew the truth. There were judges who ruled on obscenity cases by day and demanded new girls by night. There were priests who wrote sermons about purity while defiling children in the hours before Mass. There were lawmakers drafting bills on morality while paying for acts too vile to describe. And all of them paid well. So well that madams like Rosina Wright retired in estates larger than most noble homes. So well that no investigation could survive without being strangled by scandal. So well that silence became law. The hierarchy was clear. At the bottom, the girls. Above them, the madams. And at the top, those who were never named. The madams claimed they were offering protection. A roof. Meals. Stability. But that roof came with locked windows. That food came with strings. And that stability came at the cost of every future the girls might have once imagined. They called it business. And business was good. The rich paid to forget. You're watching for free, don't be the audience that erases them again. Speak. Subscribe. Or explain your silence in the comments. She was dying before she knew she was sick. The fever came first, hot, sudden, and suffocating. Then came the swelling, the lesions, the ache in her bones that wouldn't let her stand without weeping. Her breath turned sour. Her gums bled when she smiled. The sores crept across her thighs like ink spilled in secret. They called it the French disease. But it wasn't foreign. It was homegrown. Fed nightly. Syphilis. Gonorrhea. Chancroid. Infections so common in the brothels they stopped being whispered and started being expected. You could see it in the way the girls walked, stiff-legged, careful, wincing. In the way they rubbed their arms raw with soap after a client left. In the way they stopped speaking when the light faded in their eyes. Mercury was the answer. Or so they were told. It burned when it was injected. Peeled skin when it was rubbed in. It made them vomit, tremble, hallucinate. And still, they were sent back to the rooms. Pale and shaking. Hair thinning. Teeth falling out. Until they collapsed on the floor and never rose again. No one tracked their deaths officially. But by 1870, hospitals like the Lock in London were filled beyond capacity. The Lock didn't heal, it contained. A prison disguised as treatment. Girls were locked inside for months, sometimes years, forced to undergo procedures with no anesthetic, their dignity stripped with their clothing. Many were virgins, falsely accused. Others were infected by the very men who had recommended they be institutionalized. Once inside, they rarely left. If they tried to run, they were hunted. If they fought, they were tied down. If they screamed, they were labeled mad. The Register of Deaths at the Lock Hospital, from 1868 lists over 300 girls in 1 year alone, most under the age of 20. Few names. Fewer causes of death. Complications. Decline. Collapse. No one wrote what they whispered before the end. No more. Don't let him in. I want to go home. But home was gone. For every girl who died in a hospital bed, another died in a brothel without witnesses. Some slit their wrists in the bath. Some drank poison and curled into the walls. Others simply walked into the Thames and let the city forget them. Suicide wasn't seen as tragedy. It was seen as proof. Proof they were unstable. Immoral. Diseased in mind as well as body. And still, society asked no questions of the men. The men were victims. Tricked. Tempted. Innocent. They blamed the women, the same women they bought, infected, discarded. Doctors testified that women of loose character were to blame for the spread of disease. Not one word about the factory owner who visited the brothel twice a week. Not one charge against the bishop whose pet was found dead behind the vestry. The girls carried the stigma. The sentence. The grave. There were no funerals. Just quick burials. Unmarked. Unspoken. 100,000 screams muted beneath Victorian soil. And the city above never stopped celebrating its virtue. The city never asked where they went. One day a girl was on the corner, her corset too tight, her lips painted in trembling red. The next, she was gone. Not moved. Not retired. Gone. No inquiry. No posters. No panic. Because girls like her didn't vanish, they were erased. Some were carried out through back doors under the cover of fog. Wrapped in linens, stiff and cold, tossed into rented wagons like butchered meat. Their bodies carted to the edge of the Thames and dropped where the water swallowed sins. No ceremony. No prayers. Just a splash in the dark. Others were buried under the floorboards. Behind walls. In shallow pits dug in back courtyards where stray dogs wouldn't dig. Unmarked, undocumented, unremembered. And the rest? They simply disappeared. No real name. No family to claim them. No voice loud enough to demand an answer. The brothel would hire another girl the next day. Younger. Fewer bruises. Cheaper. Newspapers only printed names when scandal bled upward. When a duke was caught. When a body turned up near Parliament. When the stink became too much to ignore. Even then, the girl's name was misspelled, if it was mentioned at all. Her past reduced to 2 words, prostitute found. But there was one the river returned. She was found floating face down beneath Waterloo Bridge. Her arms were bound with corset laces. Her skin bloated, mouth open, eyes eaten clean by eels. The coroner estimated she was about 16. Virginity intact. No signs of robbery. Just bruises on her neck and wrists, and a faded heart-shaped tattoo behind her ear. No one identified her. No brothel claimed her. No arrest was made. She was filed under Jane Doe. Buried in a pauper's grave. The stone read only, unknown girl. 1871. But she lived. She laughed, once. She danced for a coin in a candlelit room and bit her lip when the door opened. She had a voice. A secret. A favorite song. All of it lost. History remembers the men who used her. The politician who signed bills in the morning and bought her silence at night. The businessman who sipped brandy as she died. Their names are etched into statues, carved into plaques, immortalized in books. Hers is not even whispered. This is what happens when pain is unprofitable. When a girl's life is measured in nightly earnings and forgotten as soon as the coins stop clinking. She died nameless. Do you care enough to make sure she isn't forgotten? If not through action, then through memory. Subscribe, or scroll on and prove history right, that nobody ever cared. Not everyone stayed silent. Beneath the gaslit oppression, amid the filth and decay, there were those who refused to look away. Who did not sip wine and shrug. Who heard the cries through locked doors and decided that silence was no longer survival, it was complicity. Her name was Josephine Butler, and she did not come from poverty. She was a respectable woman. A mother. A wife. A voice the world expected to whisper, not roar. But she stepped into the alleyways anyway. Into the brothels. Into the hospitals where girls lay trembling under the weight of shame and infection. She didn't flinch. She listened. And then she fought. Josephine led a campaign against the Contagious Diseases Acts, laws that allowed police to detain any woman suspected of prostitution and subject her to forced medical examinations, often as violent as the acts they were meant to prevent. No trial. No proof. Just suspicion. It was, in effect, legalized rape with a medical glove. Men in Parliament defended the acts. They called them necessary. They called the girls a threat to public hygiene. But Josephine called them what they were, children. Victims. Human beings. She traveled across England, holding meetings, writing pamphlets, speaking not to crowds of men in wigs, but to the hearts of women too afraid to speak for themselves. She published the testimonies no one wanted printed. She named names. She exposed hypocrisy. And they tried to ruin her for it. But she wasn't alone. Florence Fenwick Miller, a journalist and activist, took the fight to the press. She used her pen like a scalpel, cutting through Victorian niceties to reveal the rot beneath. She wrote of the brothels in Mayfair, the children who vanished from workhouses, the gentlemen whose names echoed in the halls of power but whose crimes stained the beds of the voiceless. Together, these women, and others like them, demanded change. Not just sympathy. Action. They fought to raise the age of consent, which had remained at 13 for decades, allowing predators to act with impunity. Their efforts, unrelenting and ridiculed, forced Parliament to raise it to 16 in 1885. 3 years too late for some. But not too late for all. And then there were the girls who refused to die quietly. Some escaped. Slipped out of windows, ran barefoot through streets slick with rain and coal ash, knocking on doors until someone listened. Some wrote letters. Some found their way to shelters built in secret by women of courage. A few even stood in courtrooms and gave testimony with hands trembling but voices firm. They were mocked. Threatened. Disbelieved. But they spoke. And they couldn't scrub out every name. Change came slowly. Like rot in reverse. Painfully. Reluctantly. But it came. Because a handful of women refused to pretend. Refused to look away. Refused to let the dead be buried without a fight. And for once, just once, history didn't only remember the predators. It remembered the resistance. The velvet is gone, but the hunger remains. The walls no longer drip with gaslight and laudanum. The brothels of Mayfair have been replaced with screens. The girls don't stand on street corners, they vanish through apps, lured by promises typed in clean fonts by men with no faces. But the machinery has not stopped. It has only evolved. Now, the curtains are digital. The chains, invisible. The buyers, global. And the girls? They are still for sale. Every year, millions of women and children are trafficked across borders, through cities, into rooms that look no different than the ones in Victorian Soho. Except now the locks are biometric, and the buyers pay in cryptocurrency. The grooming begins the same way it always has: poverty. A bad home. A hungry mouth. A dream too expensive to keep. And then comes the hand, stretched out with a smile, offering safety, money, love. They still call it work. They still call it choice. They still call it her fault. There are no madams in corsets now. There are recruiters in nightclubs. Modeling scouts. Managers. They whisper the same lies: you're special. Just once. You'll be safe. And still, she finds herself in a room she cannot leave, wearing something that does not belong to her, surrounded by strangers who call her by names she didn't choose. The world has changed. The tools are smarter. The brand's slicker. But the trade is the same. Buy. Use. Erase. What changed? And what didn't? The justifications are the same. The silences just as deep. The shame still strapped to the victim, not the buyer. We've made progress, yes. But we've also made it easier to look away. The screen between you and her is a veil. And veils are where evil loves to hide. This isn't just history. It's a mirror. And it's asking you whether you're still watching, or already looking away. Their hands once held dolls. Soft things. Quiet things. Painted porcelain faces with eyes that never closed, cradled in arms that had not yet learned how to flinch. Now those hands hold nothing. No names. No graves. No memory that breathes their stories aloud. They were children before they were lessons. Before they became statistics. Before they became cautionary footnotes in a society too proud to confess what it had done. Their laughter was not meant to echo inside brothel walls. Their skin was not meant to bruise beneath a stranger's grip. Their silence was not a choice, it was imposed, enforced, sold. And now, that silence waits to return. It waits for you to say nothing. To scroll. To forget. Because that's how it stayed alive the first time. Not through action. But through absence. You think this story is over. But the silence is what kept it going the first time. You're watching Tale of History. And if you felt something, anything, don't let it die with the scroll. Subscribe. And if you refuse, then type in the comments why. We dare you.